Hey songwriters, welcome back to another video here at Home Songwriting. This video is a live workshop that was recorded with other members of At Home Songwriting and my meetup group. If you haven't joined the meetup.com At Home Songwriting workshop group yet, you definitely want to, because I host live interactive songwriting workshops to teach you all about the craft of songwriting, and you can meet other songwriters. So there's a link in the description, so make sure you check that out. Today's video is all about songwriting struggles and how to get past them. We all struggle with different things in our songwriting, and I put together some of the things that I see and hear from other songwriters to hopefully help you master the craft of songwriting. So let's check it out. All right, so welcome to the Songwriting Struggles and How to Get Past Them workshop. So what we're going to talk about tonight is really things that I have experienced myself, and then also things that I've heard other songwriters struggling with, and also things that people have asked me about over time. And then we'll go through some of the things that you have questions on a little bit later as well. So one of the first things that people say that they struggle with songwriting, and one of the things that they kind of have an ongoing, I would say, just a challenge, is I don't have time. I'm sure all of us have said one time or another, I don't have time to write. I plan on writing, but I just, life gets busy. I don't have the time to do it. Well, for this struggle that we have, this is when having a system for writing makes a lot of sense, because it takes the inspiration part out of it, and it takes out sort of the waiting for inspiration to strike. And one of the things that you should do is write each day for 5 minutes, and don't think of necessarily writing a full song all of the time. Break a song into smaller tasks. So maybe, one day you work on the verse for 5 minutes. Maybe the next day you work on the pre-chorus for 5 minutes. Maybe the next day it's the chorus, and you sort of basically eat it chunk by chunk, right? You're not trying to sit down and write a full song every single day. If you have time to do that and the ability to do that, awesome. You could do 5 minutes of free writing. That can count as working on something. You could just jam on a chord progression, find a song, look it up online, learn the chords, play that for 5 minutes. That's also stimulating your songwriting brain and doing creative activities on a daily basis. And to really show you that it doesn't take that much time to write some songs or come up with some ideas, we're going to do a little lyric exercise tonight. So if you have something to write with, now's a good time to grab it. But the first step within this exercise that we're doing is, this is a list of emotions that I pulled up online. So take a few minutes, or take a couple of minutes here, read over these lists that are kind of broken down into sad, happy, hurt, confident, and energized. And then there's other words underneath that sort of fit within those categories. So take a couple minutes, read these over, and pick one of the emotions that really resonates with you tonight. So I'll just go on mute here and let you read over these and pick something and write it down, and then we'll have step 2 coming up. All right. Does everybody have one of the emotions that stands out to them? Pierre says, yep, cool. So step 2 now is, let's take 3 minutes and write about what could have happened to someone. And that could be you, it could be another person, it could just be someone in general. Let's take 3 minutes and just write about what could have happened to make that emotion happen, or what could have caused that emotion, or what could make someone feel that emotion. So we'll give it 3 minutes here, and then we'll come back and we'll move to step 3. All right, so we'll give it just a few more seconds here while everybody's starting to wrap up writing. So that was the next step in the process, was writing about what could have happened to cause that emotion. So, as you are doing this exercise, and on the days where you don't necessarily feel necessarily inspired, you can do this activity on your own where you just Google an emotion or pull up a list of emotions, pick one and write about something that could have happened to make someone feel that way. And what you're doing is not so much necessarily writing lyrics at this point, but you're kind of brainstorming about what you could write about. And usually, when you're looking at songs, the verse is really establishing the who, the when, the where, kind of what happened. So the information that you wrote down in this exercise is more than likely more geared towards verse material, whereas the emotion itself and what's being felt and kind of how the character in your song is feeling about it or how the singer is feeling about it, that's more of the chorus material, because the chorus is really the emotional centerpiece of the song that really explains how the characters are feeling. And that's what really makes a chorus something that's repeatable within a song, is because that is a section where it's more about a big idea. It's more about an emotion that is repeated throughout the song, whereas your verses are setting up that emotion and creating context to the emotion that you're writing about. So hopefully that gave you a little bit of material, just doing that, little 5-minute exercise to maybe have something that you might be able to turn into a song at some point, which would be very cool. So that just shows that, if you are struggling with time, just do these little exercises that help you at least create something and keep that creative mind flowing. The next thing that I hear a lot of people say is my melodies are not that catchy. So, what causes a melody to not be catchy, and how can you fix that? Well, weak melodies are really coming from a place where sometimes the lyrics don't have a strong meter. So there's not a lot of repetition, there's not a lot of actual lyrical structure, because lyrical meter creates the equivalent of melodic rhythm, right? So I see a lot of newer songwriters where the lines don't necessarily have any sort of repeating pattern when it comes to the meter. They're just kind of written like prose. And I think that's the difference between sometimes poetry and songwriting, is poetry sometimes doesn't have the same structure that a lyric does, because a lyric is being set to a melody. Also, I see people fitting too many words over a chord progression where they're kind of scrunching everything in, and it just, you kind of lose the meaning of the lyrics because it's all just pushed in there, and that also hurts your melody as well. Also, a lot of melodies lack a shape or a contour, and we talked about melodic shape in another workshop where, that could be an ascending melody, it could be a descending melody, it could arch up, it could arch down, it could be a zigzag melody, or it could be a static melody as well. Also, what can cause weak melodies is not writing to a pulse or a metronome, or not writing to music. A lot of times, if you're just writing sort of free form melodically, there's not a lot of, you don't get the same type of structure or the same repetition that you would if you were writing to music. So how do you then write better melodies? Well, one thing that you can do is write melody first, especially if you're used to, playing an instrument and just singing your lyrics. Try coming up with a melody without lyrics first, because it takes your logical brain out of the picture, right? One side of our brain is more logical, the other side is more emotional. The melodies fall on the emotional side and the lyrics fall on the logical side. So if you write melody first, you take your logic out of the picture, which can help you be more creative from a melody perspective. Also, don't be afraid of repetition. So repetition is how your listener learns your song. So really focus on the rhythmic repetition and the meter and how the melody repeats. Also, try writing with a metronome or a beat. And especially if you're just writing lyrics, try just writing to a click track. and reciting the melody, even if you don't have pitch, melody is half pitch, half rhythm. So if you have the rhythm side, you can come up with the pitch later. Also, the thing to think about is verse melodies are usually lower in pitch than your chorus or other parts of the song. So the verse is usually kind of the floor of the song. Choruses are usually a little bit higher. So make sure that you have that contrast between sections. And then catchy melodies also usually will follow the notes of a scale in a stepwise manner, but with it, they will have a few larger interval jumps. So see if you can, work on making melodies that sort of make natural sense from a flow perspective. Another thing that you can do is, if you're struggling with melodies, is focus on the pentatonic scale. So in the major keys, pentatonic means 5. So the 5 notes that work with almost any chord within a key are the 1, the 2, the 3, the 5, and the 6. So you can almost not go wrong if you focus on the pentatonic scale and those notes over chords within the song. So any questions on catchy melodies or anything that I just mentioned within this part? And you can raise your hand or also put questions in the chat as well. Awesome. So one of the other things that I see a lot of people struggling with is the curse of the second verse, where they say, I don't know what to write in my second verse. Very, very common. And a lot of times you don't know what to write in your second verse because you've said too much in your first verse. You've sort of shared everything that there is to share about the song, and now you have nowhere else to go. So one thing to keep in mind is your first verse usually is the first opportunity where you are establishing a who, a when, and a where for your listener. So it's the very first time that they're introduced to anything that's in your song. So this is really kind of setting the scene or setting the stage of where the song is happening, when it's happening, who it's happening to. And usually you'll need 2 of the 3, a who, when, or where, because sometimes it's implied, right? Like if you're writing a song and you're talking to someone, you might not necessarily know where it's happening, but you might know that it happened right after a breakup, right? So that would be your when. So in your second verse, you can advance any of the 3 or all of the 3, the who, the when, and the where. So that means your first verse may be about you. Like, let's say we're writing a love song. The first verse might be about you. Second verse would advance the who, which could be about me or how I'm feeling. And then your third verse or your bridge could be about us. So it might be like you, me, us. When could be past, present, future, or any order. You could start in the present in your first verse, go to the past in the second verse, and then maybe look forward to the future in your third verse or your bridge. And then the where, you can advance a location. So maybe it starts, in your childhood home, and then second verse is now you're grown up and you're living in your own house, and then third verse is somewhere else, right? So you can advance all of those things. Also, to push your song forward, you can establish a problem or a situation in the first verse and then focus on a solution in the second verse or a resolution in the next verse. So expand on what's happening and divide your topic between the verses. So you're not basically sharing everything in that first verse, if that makes sense. So again, just a quick way to remember advancing the who, when, and the where. So you can advance the when, past, present, future, any order. Same thing with the who, the you, me, us. That could be in any order as well. And then the where, could be, you could alternate between any locations too. And the other thing is you don't have to change all of those all the time. So you could actually have everything happening in one location, but maybe the perspective is changing from who is being sung about or who's being sung to, and then also the time frame could change as well. So some songs actually change all of it, but it's something good to keep in mind as you move through writing your songs. Most songs that you will hear usually have about 2 to 3 verses max. A lot of times if you're writing songs now with more verses, you might not being or you may not be being succinct in kind of what you're writing about. And a lot of times listeners are going to tune out after a few verses because the length of people's attention spans are extra short these days. So a lot of times songs that you're hearing now just have about 2 to 3 verses within them. So another, or I should say, are there any questions on the who, when, the where, the second verse information? And I see in the chat that Camden had a question about the pentatonic scale. So the pentatonic scale is not just the chords, those are the actual notes within the scale that you could sing over your chord progression. So the next struggle is my lyrics are too abstract. And when we say abstract, that means they're very much focused on emotions or concepts, and people don't necessarily know what's going on. One of the mistakes that I hear with a lot of newer songwriters is they think, I want to write a song that's really universal and I want people to fill in their own blanks. So they write really vague, poetic lines. Well, that actually does the opposite of what you want it to do, because it can leave your listener trying to figure out what is going on. And the second they have to think, they're out of feeling the song. So you want your listener to experience the emotion by knowing exactly what's going on and how they should feel about it. So in order to be more universal, be more specific in what you are saying. So if your lyrics are coming out too abstract, you should focus more on the sense-based words. So that means words and lines that you can experience through your senses, things that you can see, things that you can feel, or things that you can hear, taste, things that you can touch with your skin, things that you can smell, what's going on around the characters. So it's sight, sound, taste, touch, smell, and movement. And try to paint pictures with the words so that you're showing people the emotion without telling them the emotion. So you could say, that you're really sad, right? Like you could just come out and say, I've just been really sad in your song. But your listener is going to be like, okay, you're sad. Like that doesn't give me any emotion. But if you started your song and said, I haven't been sleeping right, my cheeks are stained with the tracks of my tears, everything's not the same since you left the door unlocked, and blah, 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 all of those things, you then paint this picture to where your listener puts themselves into the song, and then they themselves can feel the emotion. So it's really about showing more than telling that emotion. And in order to get more sense-based words, that's a good time to do object writing or destination writing. That can be kind of your secret weapon to try to come up with more sense-based language. So showing and telling, one of the rules within songs is, or a trick, I should say, not necessarily a rule, but more of a trick. One thing to try is write a couple of lines with concrete imagery, sense-based words, or the showing lyrics. Follow those 2 lines with emotional lines that explain why the first 2 lines matter and what emotions surround them. So Leslie in the chat says, what is object writing and destination writing? So that's where you take like 5 or 10 minutes and you write about either a person, place, thing, or an object, or a person, place, or an object, and you write from your senses. So you write, what does it look like? What does it smell like? What does it sound like? All of those things. So that would be like object writing, or Andrea Stolpe calls it destination writing. Because a lot of times you're writing about maybe a place where something is happening. So that's kind of the destination. Great question. Any other questions on that part? Perfect. So, what happens if you go the other way then? What if you write too much from a sense based perspective? So, this is where you're maybe showing tons of pictures, but there's no emotion, right? Like, that's kind of the equivalent of someone coming in and saying, all the windows were busted out of my car and somebody sliced all the tires, and like they just walk back out, right? Naturally we want to know, well, what happened? What are you going to do about it? How do you feel about that? It's the same with lyrics, where think about lyrics as telling a friend something. And that's the other reason why you don't want to get too poetic with lyrics, because lyrics should really be conversational and things that you would say to another person. Because when people are listening to songs, they're not listening because they want to hear pretty language. They're listening because they want to experience something, and they want to be spoken to like they're hearing it from a friend, right? So you can go too far the other way and write too concrete. You can have too many image words. So what you can do then is write about emotions that are surrounding the images that you've written, and try to have a mix of the image with the emotional content. And usually the concrete details will come first, because that gives the emotion some context. It gives you a hook that you can hang that emotion on. So explain what is happening first, and then explain how you feel about it, or how the listener should feel about it, or how the singer is feeling about it, or who they're singing to should feel about it. So that's another way to look at that as well. So songs will use both types of language. So a lot of times you'll see more showing in the verse. So the verses will tend to be a little more image based, a little bit more concrete. And then when you get to your chorus or the refrain, then that's where you're doing the telling, and you're sort of telling the emotion and sharing the overall emotion. So lyric content will usually teeter between the two. So it goes from intimate and vulnerable with the images, and then broad with the emotion side. Different genres have different mixes. So if you have pop, rock, R&B, like dance, those are doing more telling more than showing, because a lot of what is included in those genres is musical as well. So people are not only emotionally invested in like a dance song, they're also physically invested, because it makes them want to physically move their body. Now, singer-songwriter songs and some rock songs and even some pop or folk and even country, those tend to be more image-based, because they're telling a story and they're creating more of a mental movie for the listener. And when it comes to your music, just do what feels right to you. So if your song feels like there's not a lot of emotion, maybe you have too much imagery. If it feels like there's too much emotion, maybe you don't have enough imagery. So it's good to go line by line and say, is this an emotional line, or is this an image line? And if you don't have kind of a mix of the two, that's a good thing to go back and focus on while you're rewriting, for sure. Any questions on that concept? I think it's really, really powerful, for sure. Awesome. So what about my lyrics don't sound sincere? Well, a lot of times you won't necessarily get this sensation, but you'll know this by how people react to your music, and not really by what they say, but it's how they tune out, right? So if listeners don't believe what you're saying, they won't keep listening, and they won't feel it as being real, So how do you make your lyrics sound more sincere? Well, one of the first things that you can do is try not using all perfect rhymes. So if you're always using perfect rhyme, the that can sound very trite and written because it's such a powerful sonic attribute to the lyric more so than an actual content attribute that it makes it stick out. The rhyme is actually sticking out more than what you're saying, and it takes your listener out of experiencing the song from an emotional standpoint. Also, double check and make sure that you're using everyday conversational language. If you're not using that, you should. And that's where it goes back to, would I say this to another person, or would a person or would the singer actually say this? Sometimes if you read very poetic lyrics, it's like, would somebody actually talk about the foggy mist at midnight and all these things? It's like, no, they would just say, I missed you last night, right? Like, there's just things that we would just say as people. You also may be accenting unstressed syllables and lyrics. Sometimes, if they're not sung how they're spoken, they sound less believable as well. Also, try not to use words that people don't actually use in everyday life. Sometimes there are words that people used to use more than they do now. So try not to use like old-fashioned sayings. Try to speak like you normally speak. Also, try to avoid cliches. Try to say something new. Don't, because cliches are phrases that we've heard so many times that they actually mean nothing at this point. Um, excuse me. And I can't even think of any cliches right off the top of my head, but um, like one cliche that would be like blind as a bat, right? Like, what that means, but it doesn't mean anything because it's been said so many times. So try to avoid that to sound more sincere as well. What about your song not telling a story? Every song, whether it's an actual story song, because there are some songs that actually progress through a chronological story, right? There's a beginning, a middle, and an end. But every song kind of tells a story because it's really about an event and the emotions surrounding that event. So it's kind of like a song is almost like a snapshot in time as you think about it. And that's still telling a story, even if it's in a smaller period of time. So, one of the things that you can do is start with a title. If you come up with a title first, then you can write an outline that advances that idea and kind of advances a story on that topic. Try to focus on one situation and don't try to cover too much. Try to use the questions of who is this happening to, when is it happening, where, what's going on, why, how, all of those things. Those are questions your listener is going to have as they're listening. And try to focus on your chorus having the same lyrics and the same melody, but meaning more each time it comes around. So your verses actually set up your chorus. So I know some of you, as you write, you try to write choruses that change every time. And that's a huge pet peeve of mine. And you don't hear a lot of songs that have choruses that change because that's the section that everybody should be singing along to. And if you're setting up your verses right, your chorus shouldn't have to change as your song goes on. So one of the ways that you can sort of make an outline is right here on the bottom. It shows verse 1 could set up, here's the situation, what is going on. Your chorus could say how you feel about it. Verse 2 could go, what happens next? Again, advance that who, when, and where. The chorus would repeat and be the same as the chorus before. And then your bridge could be the future. Where do we go from here? And then the chorus would repeat once again as well. So it's a very effective way to think about advancing a song or advancing a story.
Oh,
Any questions on that piece of it?
could you go back one more minute?
Oh, sure. To this one?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Thank you.
And Camden in the chat says Skater Boy changed every chorus, but it copied the hook through. There are songs that do change, but the vast majority will stay the same. And I think that's one of the things that, like, I hear people do it just because they want to do it. And it's like there are songs that do it, but I think to really make sure the rest of your song is setting it up correctly, I think it's best to not touch the chorus. And if you listen to a lot of commercial or popular songs, your listeners are used to the chorus not changing very much.
Can I ask a question? I
Yeah.
get confused between the chorus and the bridge often. And or it sounds very similar, and I know it's not supposed to be, but there it is. So do you have some bridge tips?
So the bridge is usually a section that contrasts with everything that you've already heard before. So your chorus is repeated because
Right,
the word itself, chorus, comes from everybody sing, right? So
right,
the origination of a chorus came from live theater where you would have actors on the stage and they would perform a scene and then the chorus would sing about it, right?
right,
So that's where the term chorus came from. And everybody sing means that's the song that people are, singing in the car or raising their glasses
right,
to at the concert and things like
right.
that. A lot of people remember the chorus. A bridge then is sort of another section that contrasts with both the verse and the chorus. So it's a section that gives us a break or it takes us away from what we've already heard. So it's like a bridge away to something that we haven't heard before. And then it comes back to the chorus or another verse, usually after the bridge.
So when
Does
you
that make
take it
sense?
away, I'm sorry, when you take it away, how far do you go? Are you just giving another? I remember at one of your other classes or somebody's class, it was supposed to explain a little bit more about the situation or the story, but you could, but you can't go on and on about it. You have to make it short. So I wanted to know, like, should it be just a line or two to explain or to contrast, or should it be like a whole verse, or how long should it be? More of that. That's what I'm kind of asking. I think I
Yeah.
go too far.
There's really no rules on like how long it
Okay.
should be, or like some bridges are really short, some are longer. Um, and a lot of times it will advance the story, but what's changing are the chords, the melody, the where the melody is sung in relationship to like the downbeats, like the pitch range might be changing. It's
Okay.
it's creating a contrasting section that we haven't heard before, if
But
that
that's
makes
a
sense.
musical. That's all musical. So you're saying the lyrical should be kind of similar, but the music part of it should change. Okay. Then
But
that I can do.
the lyric part creates contrast too because it may have a different
Right.
number of lines, it may have a different rhythm to the lyrics, it may have a different rhyme scheme, it may have different types of rhyme. So you can definitely create contrast within lyrics as well.
Right. Okay. Okay.
Sherry,
Right.
you had your hand raised. Oh, you're muted.
If you work within the box pretty well, you know, songwriting as a box, I mean, lyric writing as a box, why do we have to follow that formula? I know we're trained to follow that formula because it makes sense in our society. But what if you break the rules when you write? You know the box so well, you know where to break it. How do you feel about that, and how do you do it?
Well, I think there's a difference. Yeah, I think it depends on what you're writing for, right? If you're writing strictly for creativity's sake and you're writing just for artistic sake, you can do whatever you want and that doesn't
Mhm.
matter as much. But when you start to if you want to be considered more commercial, or if you're trying to have people sort of like our listeners are trained because they're listening to songs that follow a certain structure, and structure changes throughout time and throughout the years, right? So
Right.
what we listen to now isn't necessarily always the same as what we listened to in like the 50s or the 60s, but the tools are still the same. So I personally think that learning what the commercial standards are and what probably the majority of your listeners are hearing helps you to be a stronger songwriter, because you are putting together something that is intentionally planned to deliver an emotion. And if you're still delivering an emotion by breaking the rules, then you have accomplished what you set out to do. But I would
Okay.
but I would say the vast majority of people that say that they're breaking the rules are really just saying they haven't taken the time to perfect the actual structure and the craft, if that makes sense. And I think
Yeah, it does. Well, I won't say anything, but yeah, I understand what you're saying, and thank you for that, for elaborating on that.
and not only does that happen in music, but it happens in movies all the time, right? Like people
Oh,
are
yeah.
people are used to seeing a certain flow of story, um like story development, right? And that's kind of what these things are really story development within songs that people have become used to, and they work. You know what I mean? But good question for sure. So we talked about, verse one can set up a situation, talk about the emotions. Verse two can maybe have a conflict. This is where we talk about the so here's the situation, but here's the conflict. And then there's the same emotion around the chorus. And then the resolution is kind of that therefore. So in some of the past workshops we've done some writing exercises where we do a so, but, therefore writing process where you can develop your song outline from there. So, some other common songwriting struggles, and some of you might react with some of these as well. Your songs get boring. So, this is where contrast becomes very important. If your songs are becoming boring, your lyrics are probably not creating an emotional connection. So, you may want to try more sense based writing. Try to have more contrast between the sections. I know people say, and Camden, I know you've asked this too, where you feel like the parts don't fit together necessarily, but contrast is not a bad thing. And a lot of times we don't have nearly as much contrast as we should. So trying to make sure that your verses are just different than your chorus is such a huge thing. Sometimes the song is just too long. Sometimes it's just, you could maybe cut out some of the musical breaks that you have, or cut the intro down. Maybe your verses are too long. Like, just kind of try to get a sense of, and especially if you play songs for people, pay attention to how you feel while you're playing a song for someone, because subconsciously you will feel uncomfortable at the parts that that should be fixed. Pay attention to that little thing that you have as you're showing other people your song, because that will tell you a lot. A lot of times there's not a hook, so there's not something that's memorable and repeated. And that could be a lyrical hook, it could be a melodic hook, it could be a musical riff. Listeners and all of us like songs where we most of the time know what's happening, but then every once in a while get a little zing of a surprise, right? So don't be afraid of repetition. I know a lot of people say, well, listen to the songs on the radio. They say the same thing over and over again, and they say the same thing over and over again. Well, songs on the radio are being listened to while people are in a car doing something else. Like, a lot of times you're not tuning in to the radio to listen from start to finish on a song. So they're giving you the little, reality TV chunks, basically. It's kind of like the best of the best hooks there. But all songs kind of need a hook, and you need to have your listener feel like they know the song by the time they're done hearing it. So part of your job as a songwriter is to have the song be able to teach itself to people. Also, your topic may not be universal enough. Sometimes you may write about something that other people don't relate to. And sometimes that's the challenge, is how do I make a topic relatable? And I think it's not necessarily what you write about, it's how you write about it. So even if you write about something that's maybe uncomfortable, like I know I've heard some songs that do a really good job of writing about like things like suicide, but they do it in a very thoughtful and creative way that it actually makes sense and it makes you feel something, and it's not, so it's not about what's the topic, it's about how you deliver it, for sure. Camden says you need contrast, but it needs to be like chocolate and vanilla and not chocolate and ketchup. Well, it depends, Camden, because if you're writing a song that's very jolting, maybe you do want chocolate and ketchup. I think it comes down to what's that emotional like content that you're trying to describe. One of the things that I hear a lot is I don't play an instrument. That's definitely a struggle with some folks that just write lyrics. You could take instrument lessons. You could also take vocal lessons. You could write songs just by singing your lyrics. You don't necessarily need to have the chords and the music behind it. If you just know how the song goes, you could usually find someone that can put chords to it. And just harmonizing an existing melody and lyrics is not becoming a songwriter. It's just they're putting chords to your song that already exists. You could practice just playing chords really simply. You don't have to know how to play a whole lot. You can just play simple chords. You could find a co-writer, or a songwriting partner that complements you. Maybe they play chords. You can also just use a metronome and write your lyrics to the metronome. So you actually have the rhythm part down, and you don't necessarily need the pitch part as well. Also, I hear people say I have writer's block. Well, writer's block is usually where you either can't think of anything to write about, or you are just so worried about what you're going to write about that you just write nothing. So the cure for writer's block is really know-how and the song craft. So knowing that you don't need inspiration, you can do the work and the inspiration will come. So that's like we did the exercise at the beginning of this, where just take an emotion and write about an event. And there you have something that will get your brain working to try to put those two things together. So our minds as humans are wired to basically problem solve. So if you take even two words that are seemingly unrelated, our mind will try to connect them in a way to make them make sense. So you could even go to like random word generators and just pull up random words and start writing. And that will usually trigger something in you to where you actually start to get ideas that you didn't have before. Also, again, great songs are not what you write about, it's how you write them. Also, I listen to other songs, to try to get ideas and try to listen to other genres and styles. I think if you only listen to certain genres, you get bored with some of the style. So if you break out and you listen to things that you normally wouldn't listen to, you start to see that, wow, there's actually a ton of stuff that's different and fresh, and like you don't just have to fit in the one box, right? So listen to lots of genres and see what they're doing. And also, like, there's lots of songs out there, so just pick a song and analyze it, and like try out the rhyme scheme, try out the chord progression, like all of those things to help them or help you write your next song. One of the things I hear from people too, is my songs don't sound modern. This is when you start to send your songs to be critiqued, or you're like talking to publishers. A lot of times they'll say your song sounds dated or it doesn't sound modern enough. A lot of times this is a product of the melody and the delivery of the lyrics and the production. So what you want to do is listen to the current charting songs, because the songs that are on the charts are the ones that are making the most money, and those are the ones that the publishers and different people are going to want to emulate. So pay attention to the rhythms, the melodic patterns, and how it's phrased. Also, what's going on in the production, what instruments are they using, what is the song structure. Try to write a similar song using the chord progression or maybe similar rhythms, and even learning to cover some of these songs to be able to play them and sort of learn the flow of the songs as well. Also, kind of along the lines of not sounding modern, there's the my songs all sound the same. Some of this can come from doing the same process all the time. So you're kind of falling into habits. I find that I do that with chord progressions. Like it's almost like muscle memory kicks in and I start playing the same chords that I've done a million times. I start singing the same melody I've done all the time. So try to change the order of what you're writing first. And this could be even for you lyricists. Maybe if you always start with a chorus, maybe start with a verse, or maybe start, vice versa. Maybe start with a chorus instead of the verse. Like write in a different order to get your mind thinking in a different way. Also, try to write without using an instrument. If you usually write with an instrument, try to write something without it. Again, listen to other genres, work with different co-writers, and also understand that you might just have a style that is you, right? Like there's some artists and some songwriters where when you hear their music, you instantly know, that's a Prince song, or that's, whoever it is. And that's okay. You want to sort of develop your own thing so people know that it's originally you. What about if you're stuck using the same chord progressions? Well, you can use chord progressions of other songs. So one of the best ways to basically try new things is to steal them from other songs. They can't be copywritten, so use other song progressions, and you'll find that tons of songs have the same exact chord progressions. You can change the order or the rhythm of the chords to add a different feel, and it's a great way to try new things and expand your musical vocabulary as well. So that's what I have had prepared for tonight. So what are some other struggles that you all may want to chat about and kind of go over tonight? Does anybody have anything they want to share that they're maybe struggling with or that they have struggled with? Definitely put it in the chat or raise your hand as well. Is this helpful? Are some of those tips things that you can think about as you're writing? Greg's doing the claps. Thank you, Greg. Jay.
Yeah, Chad, this is absolutely helpful. I mean, right now, most of what I'm struggling on has to do with technological hiccups, which I'm trying to iron out. But aside from that, I mean, a lot of your tools and things I've learned from Andrea and others who have been in your workshops have been tremendous help, I feel. And again, I can't thank you enough for hosting these.
Oh, you're welcome. And for those of you who are newer to the workshops too, the YouTube channel has a lot of the past workshops that you can check out. So it's at homesongwriting.com. And it helps more people find it if you subscribe to the channel. So that's your cost of admission, is just please subscribe to the YouTube channel. Looks like in the chat, Leslie says she procrastinates. Do I schedule songwriting time? So yes, I will schedule time, but I also struggle with procrastination too. I find that I have all of my best ideas while I have to work. And then by the time I get off work, I don't want to do anything besides like eat and watch Netflix. So yeah, I struggle with procrastination too. Um, I have to do it in small chunks that lead to longer chunks. So I will just say I'm going to spend 5 minutes, and then that 5 minutes turns into an hour or more. For me, it's like going to the gym. Once I get there, I'm fine, but it's that getting past the start, right? It's not doing it, it's the starting it that I procrastinate on. Um and I also find that I have to write fast because I won't go back to a lot of songs that I start, if that makes sense. Like my my mindset is in a certain place when I'm writing, and if I lose that place, it's really hard to sometimes to get back into that if I don't at least get a draft, right? I don't know if any of you relate to that at all. Greg shaking his head yes.
Oh yeah, yeah. Too many things going on at the same time. Too many songs that are just ideas or chord progressions or a few lines or a hook, and then not finishing them.
Absolutely. Yeah. So one of the I try to incorporate some of these writing exercises into these workshops, and I want to try to balance like what's the theory behind doing the exercises with the exercises themselves. But there's a great program that you can usually get, and usually he puts it on sale, but Graham English is the guy's name. He has a site called speedsongwriting.com. Um, he says that it's like $100, but usually you can get it for like 30, or like he has certain specials, or it might be, it says it's 200, but he usually sells it for like 80. It just depends. But his course, Speed Songwriting, is something that I've gone back to a lot, where it's all about even setting a timer for each step of the song and writing, so it takes your critic out of the picture. So basically you're just getting it down, and then you can go back and rewrite it later, which is helpful. Leslie, did you have something else?
Yes. I came across, reading a book by Elizabeth Gilbert, Big Magic on songwriting. And she has this idea that ideas are entities that come to, you kind of like connect with, and that you need to commit the time to finish the project. And she has this just story that blew me away about a novel that she started about a woman in the Amazon that, it had all these very, very specific details. And then something else came up in her life and she broke her contract with her idea. And she met this other woman who she found out was writing a novel with all the same specifics. And this other woman got the idea about the time that she broke her contract with her idea. So I'm fascinated with this theory, because
her theory is like she let that go.
Yeah.
So
the idea
somewhere
found somebody else. Yeah. And there are I guess I typically do like to do one song at a time, start to finish, but there are some that I will go back to, starts of a song, and I will go back to them and finish them. But I think there's something about sometimes it's like I never committed with that idea in the first place. I just kind of said, oh, this is sort of fun. So yeah, I don't know, the whole creativity thing is fascinating to me.
Oh, totally. And like, I know we've talked about before, a lot of us have done like the Artist Way with Julia Cameron. Like that's really powerful. With her morning pages, and just every week there's different, projects and things. There's one that I'm listening to on Audible right now, and I don't remember the author's name, but the book is called Embrace Your Weird. And it's basically about being a creative freak. And it's kind of along the same lines of the Artist Way, where it's like she has these different exercises and things. But yeah, a lot of it is creativity, and I think for me, you have to enjoy the creative process more than the result, right? Because if you don't enjoy the process, you're always going to be chasing something that you never catch, right? So it's all about, did you have fun, and did you put something into the world that didn't exist before? For me, that's the success, right? And finding that flow state that they talk about, where time disappears and all of that stuff. um Back to the procrastination or not finishing things, I go through phases where I finish, like I won't do a new song until I finish the one that I'm on. But then there's other times where I get into a habit of I'm starting a bunch of stuff and never finishing anything. And I read a quote somewhere that said, whatever you do, that's what you train yourself to do. So if you start and don't finish, you're training your brain to never finish. So if you want to finish more stuff, you have to train your brain to finish it. Even if it's painful, finish it, because that will teach your brain what it feels like to actually complete something, which I think is really cool. Awesome. Thanks, Leslie. Sherry. Oh, you're on mute.
Okay, thank you. One of my problems is I have an extremely strong internal rhythm. And I find myself ta-da, ta-da, whatever the rhythm is in the song. But when it comes to the bridge, it's a relief, to break up the chorus and the verse and come to that bridge and let it breathe a little more. And I wanted to say, I used to write poetry and short stories, and I just had these huge pressures internally that made me, think of the final product. Oh, I want to get it out there. I want to get it out there. When I moved to lyric writing one day, just out of the blue, I had the time of my life. I had a ball. And that's what I have with lyric writing. I don't have any expectations until I'm done. And then I think, oh, where can I put this? What can I do with this? But I don't have any expectations when I'm doing this process. It's just what is, and then how can I make it more viable in the industry? I just wanted to say that in case anybody else has either of those issues, too much internal rhythm, which can make it boring and pedantic. And then, having fun is essential at our level. It really
Totally.
is. The passion has to be there just for the love of the passion. So
Yep.
I'll be quiet now. I'll stop.
No, that's great. Great sharing, Sherry. For the rhythm thing, I definitely suffer from that, where I write in common meter. So it's kind of that Mary had a little lamb, da 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 da, da 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 da. Like a lot of people do that. Like they write in 4 lines and it's A B A B. And I do it, other people do it. There's a lot of effective songs that do it, but eventually it gets very pedantic, or the word that you had said is that's a good word for it. I think to try to break out of that, you should try to write sections that have different numbers of lines, and think of the rhyme scheme before you start writing, and also write maybe the rhymes first and then write the lines that go with those rhymes. Kind of write backwards in that respect.
Okay, great.
One thing that I have been experimenting with lately is trying to write faster, especially from a lyric perspective, just ideas. Can you all see the whiteboard? Okay. So some of you who have corporate jobs, have you ever heard of the 5 whys? Like if you want to get to the core of an issue, or if you want to find the root cause of an issue, you ask why 5 times. So, our project isn't working. Why? And then there's that answer. Well, why is that answer? And then you keep going. Well, I'm like, how could you apply why to songwriting, right? So I've been thinking about this 5 whys, and you can write either forward or backward. So somebody just throw out a lyric line, just one line of lyrics that you might have. Anybody?
To borrow the great Trent Reznor, hey pig, hey you.
What? Hey pig, hey you?
Yep,
I don't know what that means, but
from the song Piggy.
um so let's do hey man. So the thing to Razzie in the chat says, is it just me in love? So let's add that to our lyric here. And I'm going to
Okay.
change. So we're writing, hey man, hey you, is it just me in love? Well, to use the why process here, you would say, why does that matter to the listener? So is it just me in love? So why does that matter? Well, I've been feeling some things. Well, why have you been feeling some things? I can't get them off of my mind and can't sleep. Well, why does that matter? I think this might be the real thing. And then you've got a few lines that might be your verse, right? And then when you get to your chorus, it's like, well, how do you feel about that? It's like, it's good, but it's bad. So now you have kind of a verse where you say, hey man, hey you, is it just me in love? I've been feeling some things. I can't get them off my mind and I can't sleep. I think this might be the real thing. And then get to the chorus where it's like, it's good, but it's bad. And then that sounds like a hook to me. So, maybe the song's called Good But Bad, right? So like you can write really quickly if you just use questions after every line. And I've been trying to figure out how can I teach that, because it's been working really well for me in my own personal writing, and it just really speeds things along when I think we overthink writing songs, and I think we can take situations in our own life and just write them very plainly based on, why does this matter to the listener and what do I feel about it? I hope that makes sense. But that actually sounds those are actually pretty decent lyrics that you could probably massage into something, right? It's not poetic, but it establishes lines that make sense to a listener, and you know what's going on when you read it. Hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah.
Ron, you have your hand raised.
I do. This 5 whys, that's like maybe a partial answer to my question. But so one of the things that I struggle with is I do my destination writing, my object writing. I come up with some really good stuff. But then how do you take what you've written without putting a whole paragraph into a verse and write it so that it's one line, or consolidate it into a line that's really interesting to the user? I think that's where one of my biggest struggles is. I don't know that you can answer that. It has to come with practice and execution.
Well, I can definitely probably show you what my process is by using those things. Let me look for a file here. If I can get to, oops, I have to do this differently. And I think I probably have shared this. Oops, that's not what I want. I have to get to my right Google thing here. So, I wrote a song. Let's see if I can zoom in on this too. There we go. So I did an object write. I'll share my screen. Last September. So I pulled a random. I have noun cards, and I pulled a random noun card, and the picture on the card was strawberries. So my object writing, where I wrote about sight, sound, taste, touch, smell, and movement, was strawberries. So I wrote just outside of town by the airport, there's a field where you can pick your own strawberries. You can see the airport off to the left. There's a gravel road on one side and an oil highway on the other. There is a sign that says pick your own. The best time to go is just as the sun is going down. Shadows from the shelter belt loom over the rows of green plants and dashes of red. The air smells like summer, that mix of plants, dust, and humidity. You can smell the tar from the road and the exhaust from the cars that go by now and then. We grab some baskets and start out inspecting the rows for the biggest, reddest, and juiciest strawberries. There's grasshoppers and flies that move around us. We pick the berries and plop them into our basket. Your smile was a mirror reflecting the setting sun. It was like that flash was in slow motion and it took my breath away, those eyes smiling. So that was the object writing, right? So then what I would do is go through that and pick out internal and external lines. So external means, is it happening outside of the character? Is it something that you can experience through your senses? So is it something that you can see, you can hear, you can taste? So I took out all of those lines. So it's just outside of town by the airport, a field where you can pick your own strawberries. See the airport to the left. You know, as you can see, those were all of those. Well, most of what I was saying in this writing was based on senses. I didn't say a lot of emotionally based stuff. So what I did then was think back on summers, and I wrote then from an emotional standpoint and something that emotionally stuck with me. So I wrote, I love those summers back when we used to go fishing and Grandpa still had that old Buick. We would load up in the car and head out of town. Man, I wish Grandpa was still here. I wish we had all of that time that we did back then when time seemed to go slower. Summers seemed to last a lifetime. My heart keeps seeing these flashbacks of the sun shining on our smiles, golden moments that are captured somewhere that matters. We can't go back and that is sad, but man, did we have some happy times. There's that feeling that never got old, but it's hard to find. Smiles like mirrors reflecting the sunset sun and then rays of golden light. So once I had that, I then went back and picked out some titles from what I had written there. So I wrote those summers, used to go fishing, old Buick, load up in the car, head out of town. I wish Grandpa was still here. And then I had riding lawnmower as well. So what I ended up doing is writing a song and picking the title Those Summers. And then I took those external lines and created the verses. So it says, there's a place where the shadow of a shelter belt, which some of you don't know what a shelter belt is. It's a row of trees that blocks the wind. It's a South Dakota thing, I guess. It says, there's a place where the shadow of a shelter belt hangs over the fields of strawberries, where a homemade sign says, pick your own. It's where we played in the hazy days of August, chasing shade with dust and grasshoppers, a retreat off a gravel road. So that was the verse. It went to a pre-chorus of sweet nectar of memories flows in my mind. I want to go back. I want to go back again, back to those summers, picking berries in the country, those summers, mowing grass and making money. Man, I wish Grandpa could take us on his boat. If I had a time machine, it's the first place I'd go to those summers. So using those or using the object writing, you can come up with those images to start putting into a structure and a rhyme scheme, Ron. So that's one thing that you can do. The other thing that I've been experimenting with is taking those lines, and I'm going to try to do this here, and then finding a random line order site. So there's sites that will help you randomize line order. So I'll take all of those lines, and then I'll share my screen here too. And I just Googled random line order and it came up with this browserling thing. So I'll dump all of those lines in there and I'll just randomize it and see what order and if anything sounds like lyrics when I put these in all different random orders. So I'll randomize it again. So this would be flash in slow motion, took my breath away. It smells like summer. Juice is sweet like memories. Memories are berry juice. See the airport to the left. Like parts of that sound kind of cool, right? It kind of goes off a little bit, but not putting so much thought into what we're writing can actually open up a lot of doors for us by just kind of playing with chance a little bit. So I try to do that with my writing quite a bit because it gets me out of writing line by line, and it's more of sculpting the lines together rather than having to stop and think about it of, well, what am I going to say next? And what do I want to rhyme with next? If that makes sense.
It does, and it helps a lot. And a process outside of my norm that I have to kind of adapt to, but yeah, that's really great. Thank you.
Cool. Anything else that you guys want to chat about or talk about tonight? Everybody's kind of quiet. Well, if you guys don't have anything, that's all I've got for you. So I appreciate, you spending some time. And the next workshop that's coming up is a week from this Saturday. It's on October 8th, where we're going to dive into verses. And we're actually going to talk a lot more about developing verses and where you get material for them, and then also analyze some hit song verses too, so you can see some of the tools in action. So Christine, you said you have a question? Oh, you're on mute if you have a question, Christine.
Okay.
There we go.
You did kind of answer it, but I want to clarify it a little bit more. If you're a lyric writer and you're not a musician, but you have a tune in your head and you said to get a co-writer, you said to get someone to help you with the music. Okay. But sometimes between the time you're writing the lyric and the time you're kind of singing the lyric or whatever, it kind of diffuses. Is there a website or a link or an app that you can take our humming or singing and make it a little bit better, that a musician could say, oh, okay, I know what they want? Because you always seem to know a lot about links and choruses, websites. And I wondered if you had something like that to help us, because that is really frustrating to me, to leave it and then I don't remember it, or it isn't as clear as it was before. And I don't know where to put it either. I know you can put it on your phone, or you can put it maybe on your computer, but I just wanted to know if there's an app or something I could use to make it stronger.
There's none that I can think of right offhand. Jay, do you have your hand raised?
I do. What I would say is that if that's the case, if you can afford one, try to get like a little voice recorder if you don't have one on your phone. And
I
then
do.
Okay, great. And then record as many of those as you possibly can. And over time, you'll develop a library of them. Now, that aside, once you have quite a few of them, start looking around the community. I'm sure there are quite a few people in this organization who have either a copy of Cubase or Studio One or Melodyne. And I'm sure quite a few of them would be willing to at least one or two take take one or two files and just transpose them over to MIDI for you. And
Okay.
maybe you'll be able to twist their arm a little bit and get them to transpose those MIDI transpositions into other instruments if you hear them a certain way. And
Okay.
so that's what I would recommend. A, build a library so that you can prioritize which ones you want to beg people for their time on. And then
Right.
B, going and asking.
Okay. Thank you. Thank
Very
you.
welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Chad, you're on mute.
Unmuting would help, wouldn't it? No, I was gonna say, thanks, Jay. So the other night I was working on a track, and I had a track that I was working on and I wanted to kind of remember the melody, so I just recorded it into my phone. So I don't know how well you guys will be able to hear this, but so that's kind of what I'll do so I remember at least what I was thinking, because if I don't capture it, it's probably gone, you know. So yeah. So Christine, even just if you want to just really remember something on how it goes, like phone is a lot of people use the phone for sure. Yeah, well, thanks for everybody for attending. Like I said, if you haven't followed the YouTube channel, definitely I appreciate, subscribing there, and then hopefully see you at the next workshops, and hopefully you leave with some sort of nugget each time that you can put into practice, and then, hopefully it helps you write better songs.
Thank you, Chad.
Thank you.
Thanks everybody. Have a
Thank
good night.
you.
You too.